Before we start, leave a like right now because it helps a lot for this content to reach more people. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any important updates, because what's happening behind the scenes in the NBA and in American sport in general is big. It's the kind of thing that changes legacies, changes history, and completely shifts the direction of several franchises. The trade deadline is exactly 1 week away, and when we get to this point in the season, everything gets more intense, faster, and more unpredictable. It's not distant speculation anymore. It's not backroom chatter with no consequences. Now it's decisions. Now it's do or die. And at the center of all of this is a name that needs no mystery at all: Giannis Antetokounmpo. In the last few hours, the atmosphere around Giannis's future has truly heated up. It's no longer that generic talk of any team would love to have him. Reliable sources suggest we're getting close to a decisive moment. So much so that one of the league's most respected insiders did something rare. Drastically narrowed the list of teams that are actually in the game. No 20 curious franchises, just a few. Specific, serious. That list includes the Miami Heat, Minnesota Timberwolves, New York Knicks, and Golden State Warriors. That alone says a lot. It's not a random list. These are teams with clear ambition, internal pressure, and championship windows that can't wait any longer. When people talk about Miami, a lot of reactions are immediate. Giannis in Miami sounds powerful, sounds dominant, sounds almost unfair. But when you look at it more coldly, the scenario isn't that simple. For the Heat to pull off a deal of that size, they would have to tear down almost everything. The team would lose identity, depth, and flexibility. It would become a hollowed-out version of Milwaukee itself, just in a different state. It's no coincidence that many people turn their noses up at that possibility. The price would be way too high. Minnesota, on the other hand, is the kind of idea that looks amazing on paper. Giannis playing next to Anthony Edwards is something any basketball fan would want to see. Energy, explosiveness, aggression on both ends of the floor. It would be fun, intense, loud. The problem is the same as always: assets. Minnesota simply doesn't have right now the package needed to convince Milwaukee on its own. They're short on draft picks, short on pieces that would truly excite a rebuild. That pushes any conversation into an even more complex scenario involving 3 or even 4 teams. And that's where things start to get really interesting. Because when we talk about trades at this level, almost none happen in a straight line. Someone always steps in to provide picks, absorb contracts, balance salaries. And in that puzzle, some franchises show up as key pieces, even without receiving the main star. Teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Portland Trail Blazers emerge as possible facilitators precisely because they've stockpiled draft picks like few teams in the league. But before we get into those details, it's impossible to ignore the emotional and historical impact of 2 specific possibilities: the Golden State Warriors and the New York Knicks. Starting with the Warriors. The idea of seeing Stephen Curry and Giannis Antetokounmpo on the same team feels like something out of a video game. 2 players who redefine their positions, who change the way the game is played. But when you move past the visual impact and into practical reality, legitimate doubts appear. Even with both of them together, the West would still be a minefield. There is no easy path. It would be a brutal mission to reach the conference finals, let alone lift the trophy. Still, there's something powerful about that gamble. The Warriors have draft picks, a lot of them, 4 first-round picks plus 3 swaps. That's the kind of package Milwaukee can't ignore. In the short term, those picks don't shine as much because no one expects a team with Curry and Giannis to collapse. But the NBA isn't only about today. Down the line, when Steph is no longer at his peak, those picks could become pure gold. The problem, as always, is the players involved. Jonathan Kuminga alone doesn't solve it. Draymond Green is a huge name, but he also raises questions. Jimmy Butler, besides being injured, doesn't fit perfectly into the timeline Milwaukee would need to start. Even so, if you're the Warriors, the logic is clear. The post-Steph future becomes secondary. It's all in. No fear, no looking back. And then a question appears that splits opinions. If you had to choose who goes, Draymond or Butler, For anyone thinking about winning right now, Butler ends up being the more logical name, both because of his physical situation and his contract status. But at the same time, Draymond is seen as a more limited version of Giannis. He defends, passes, leads, but he doesn't shoot. Having both together can create redundancy. It's not a simple decision. On the other side of this equation is New York, and here the tone changes. Unlike other superstars of the past, Giannis seems genuinely open to the idea of playing there. It's not that automatic rumor that shows up every time a big name becomes available. There's real conversation, there's mutual interest, and, more importantly, there's a competitive roster waiting for a piece of that caliber. With Giannis, the Knicks wouldn't just be trying, they'd be fighting for real. The East would be completely reshaped. The problem, once again, is draft picks. New York doesn't have many. That forces the franchise to look for a third team willing to enter the deal, absorb contracts, and send picks to Milwaukee. The idea makes sense on paper, but when you start looking for who would actually be willing to do that, the options shrink. You need someone who wants a name like Karl Anthony Towns, and at the same time, is willing to give up valuable picks. It's not easy. Not even the Thunder, who have picks to spare, seem interested in that kind of move right now. Even so, among all the possibilities, New York still sounds like the most realistic scenario. Because here, it's not just about assets. It's about direction. It's about window. It's about urgency. And that takes us to a central point in this discussion. Giannis doesn't need to go to a big market. He needs to go to a team that's ready to go deep in the playoffs. The problem was never Milwaukee as a city. The problem is the Bucks no longer competing at the highest level when it truly matters. That's why other names enter the conversation. The Atlanta Hawks show up as an option more focused on rebuilding than on an immediate title. The Houston Rockets and San Antonio Spurs, on the other hand, completely changed the tone. San Antonio has something nobody else has. Other teams' picks, young talent, and, of course, Victor Wembanyama as an untouchable piece. Keep their guards, keep Wemby, add Giannis, and the team could jump straight to the top of the league. It would be an instant switch flip. Houston also comes in strong. Steven Adams' injury completely changes the equation. Without him, the team loses physical force, loses rebounding dominance, loses identity. That makes sacrificing important pieces like Alperen Sengun start to make more sense. But if you're Milwaukee, it's not enough. You're going to want someone like Reed Shepherd included, someone with real star potential. And there's still one name almost nobody takes seriously, but that should be considered more carefully: the Detroit Pistons. Detroit has something extremely valuable in this kind of negotiation: contracts that make the salary matching easier, interesting young players like Ausar Thompson, and all the draft picks you could imagine. Going all in right now, the Pistons could instantly turn into one of the strongest teams in the East. The fit, of course, isn't perfect. They lack shooting. Cade Cunningham needs the ball. Giannis does too. It's not an automatic marriage. It would require adjustments, patience, and creativity. But if it worked, it would be devastating for the competition. So far, though, there are no concrete signs of Giannis getting closer to Detroit. What's being heard most strongly remains New York and Golden State. And between those two, there's a growing feeling that the Warriors' path has been built for a long time. Stephen Curry deserves one more real shot at going for everything. That's the feeling behind the scenes. The attempt with Jimmy Butler seemed like that, but it came up short. Now with Giannis, it would be different. It would be definitive. But this story doesn't stop here. Because while all of this is happening in the NBA, another heavy discussion has gained strength in American sport, involving legacy, history, and public judgment. And that's where the conversation shifts completely, leaving the courts and heading into American football. While the basketball league lives through this whirlwind of decisions that could completely redefine the balance of power over the next few years, another heavy debate has taken over American sport, this time outside the courts. A debate that doesn't involve trades, draft picks, or tactical fit, but something even more delicate: legacy, memory, history, and how time can change the way giants are seen. The discussion starts from an episode that caught a lot of people by surprise. Bill Belichick, one of the most successful coaches of all time, was not voted in on the first ballot for the Hall of Fame. The reaction was immediate and intense. So intense that the institution itself felt obliged to release an official statement saying it respects the passion of fans and the media, but will take action if the voting process is disrespected. That, by itself, says a lot. When an organization at that level needs to speak out, it's because it touched something deep. And the next question is inevitable. Does this change the way the New England Patriots dynasty will be remembered? For many, the answer is still no. The argument is simple and hard to dispute. From 2001 to 2018, the Patriots dominated the NFL like few teams in the history of any sport. 6 Super Bowl titles and 9 appearances in the final. An absurd run of success, consistency, and longevity. Something comparable only to the rarest dynasties, like the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA. There is, of course, the ghost of Spygate. And that's exactly where things get more complex. For those who lived through that era, the episode is seen as an isolated chapter that doesn't define the entire journey. But for a younger generation that didn't follow those years closely, Belichick not making the Hall right away reignites doubts. It creates a small mental asterisk where there wasn't one before. It doesn't erase the titles, but it adds a layer of questioning. Others completely disagree with that reading. They argue that, at the end of the day, nobody steps onto the field to execute spying schemes. Players still have to throw, block, run, tackle. 6 titles don't happen by accident and not by tricks. They happen through excellence sustained over nearly 2 decades. And when history is written with enough distance, nobody will put Spygate next to Belichick's name as if it were a permanent subtitle. This controversy, in that view, will dissolve over time like so many others before it. Belichick will still enter the Hall of Fame, probably on the first ballot the next time, and the debate will lose steam. But the conversation didn't stop there. It moved into a hypothetical exercise that helps show how scandals, or the absence of them, weigh on the scales of history. Imagine that 18 years from now, Drake May at quarterback and Mike Vrabel as head coach build the exact same resume as Tom Brady and Belichick. 6 titles, 9 Super Bowl appearances, identical numbers. Who would have the better dynasty? In that scenario, with no stain and no controversy, the tiebreaker would naturally go to the new duo, not because they'd be better, but because they wouldn't carry any historical noise. That shows how context shapes collective memory. It's not enough to win. You have to win without leaving doubts behind. And that takes us to another iconic figure whose legacy has always divided opinion, Eli Manning. The question is direct and uncomfortable for many fans. If Eli hadn't won 2 Super Bowls specifically against the Patriots, would he even be discussed as a future Hall of Famer? For many people, the answer is no. Eli had a long, steady, respectable career. But when you look at the numbers coldly, hard points appear. He led the NFL in interceptions 4 times. He finished his career with exactly the same number of wins and losses. He was never named All-Pro. Statistically, he did not dominate his generation when compared to other contemporary quarterbacks like Philip Rivers. The discussion gets even harsher. Rivers had better, more consistent numbers, but never won a Super Bowl, and for many, that keeps him out of the Hall. If Rivers doesn't get in, why would Eli get in just because of 2 historic games? The answer is heavily about context and market. In New York, everything is amplified. Every play becomes narrative. Every victory becomes legend. There, Eli is treated as an unquestionable Hall of Fame name. Outside of New York, the view changes a lot. Many see Eli as a very good quarterback, decisive in specific moments, but not as one of the all-time greats. The cautious consensus is that he'll probably get in one day, but not so soon. Before him, names like Ben Roethlisberger with a stronger overall resume should be prioritized. Then comes Tom Brady, whose entry will be practically automatic. That pushes Eli further into the future, into a long and competitive queue. And even so, for a huge slice of the public, all of this comes down to 2 plays, 2 Super Bowl throws that seem to erase more than 200 interceptions over a career. It's the power of the moment, the power of narrative, The power of winning when nobody believes. At the end of the day, all these discussions, whether it's Giannis Antetokounmpo changing teams, NFL dynasties, or who does or doesn't deserve a place in the Hall of Fame, are about the same thing. Legacy isn't built only with talent. It's built with timing, context, the right decisions, and often the courage to go all in when the opportunity appears. Giannis is exactly at that point right now. His next career step will define how he's remembered, just as Belichick, Brady, and Eli were defined by decisions, wins, and circumstances that went beyond cold statistics. And that's why the next few days promise to be historic. If you enjoyed this content, leave a like right now because it helps the channel a lot. Subscribe so you don't miss the next updates and turn on the bell because this story could still get massive chapters very soon.